The Tolkien Road, episode 160, concerning Tolkien the film. Oh yeah, you know what time it is. What time is it, Greta?
It's Tolkien Road time.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes.
Coming at you.
Yes, sirs, and yes, ma'ams. We have got an episode coming for you now.
It's a very special episode.
Yes.
You're not going to want to miss this one, people.
No. Don't even think about missing it.
Yeah, don't even think about it.
Don't even think about missing it. Let's, we've just gotten back from seeing Tolkien, the film. You thought for a second there, wait a minute. For a second there, admit it. You thought I was saying we actually went to see Tolkien, and you're like, wait a minute. He lives all the way over in England. How's that possible? You guys live in Tennessee. Yeah, well, we're talking about the movie.
The movie,
Tolkien.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about Tolkien, like we always do, but we're honing in on the film.
Yeah.
The film. The
biopic.
Tolkien film. The biopic, exactly. That's what it is. It's a biopic. So, before we dive into our discussion, we need to remind you about Patreon. Don't forget to head on over to Patreon and pledge $1 or more per episode, and you will be awesome, and we'll talk about you and say nice things about you on the podcast when you do that.
Yes,
so,
we will.
And if you pledge $5 per episode, then we'll say 5 times as nice things about you on the podcast.
Oh.
Yeah.
Before you know it, if enough people give enough money, this podcast it's just going to be us saying all kinds of nice things about our patrons. It's not even going to be about Tolkien.
Yeah, man, somebody needs to start a podcast where they just do that. They're
just
like,
do that.
Just patronize my podcast, and then did you ever? There was a website years ago where a guy he bought a domain and he started selling a pixel. Like he would make like you could like buy advertising space on this page, and he sold like a pixel.
I know about this.
Where did we hear about that?
Where did we hear about it?
We heard about it somewhere, but anyway, it was kind of
It's pretty ingenious.
Yeah, well, and then people, it was kind of this little novelty thing, so people started buying space on it. He became like a millionaire or something. Was it like a guest? Somebody we know knows that person or something like that.
Maybe
was it a former guest?
Could be.
Told us about that.
Could be.
Who was that?
We'll have to go back in the archives and.
Oh, you know who it was? It was Marianne. Marianne and Chris told us about. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
That's right.
Marianne knows. Or they
who did it.
They met him when they were living in England, right?
Yeah.
The guys.
Didn't she work for him for a little while or something?
She did work for him.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's right.
Okay. Wow.
Anyway, tangent. Major tangent there,
yeah,
people.
I don't even quite know how that was connected remotely.
Patreon, hook yourselves up.
Oh, right. Okay.
Patronize us.
Yes, please.
Become, if you're Latin, that means become our fathers. Become our fathers.
Oh.
Patronize us.
I like that.
Right.
I like that. It's good stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So we're just going to talk about the film because, and we literally just got back from seeing it a couple hours ago.
And we went to dinner right after.
Yeah.
And it was actually kind of painful.
And Greta
forcing ourselves not to talk about it.
Greta kept on wanting to bring it up, and I'm like, we're not going to talk about it. We're going to save it all for the podcast.
It was so hard not to talk about it, so I'm really glad we're finally going to talk about it.
So, well, let's stop talking about it, and let's actually talk about
That's what I'm talking about.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I was talking about that first.
Okay, good.
And then you talked about it.
Well, then we're on the same wavelength.
Oh, okay.
So let's do this.
All right. So, so Tolkien the film, it's pretty clear it covers, it covers really the early part of his life, right? Like the main focus here is the early part of his life. They're not trying to show, a bunch of biographical details. Like they're not trying to show him like writing Lord of the Rings, right?
Mm-hmm.
That would be kind of a boring movie.
That would be kind of boring.
Right, he is at his desk writing.
Just writing.
No, and there's the early part of his life. There's some pretty eventful stuff that happens.
It really is.
Right?
Yeah. Do you think a disclaimer is warranted?
Well, we should probably throw out there, like so. If you haven't seen the movie yet, spoiler alert. We're obviously just going to talk about everything. So, it's not like if you didn't already know anything about Tolkien, like you might want to go see the movie first or whatever. But so we're gonna have spoilers here, so just be forewarned.
Just FYI.
So movie starts off, and the whole thing I'd say is kind of framed by his is framed by his experience in World War I, right? So
yes,
that plays. It's the first thing in the film, and then it's not the very last thing, but it's kind of the the style of the film is like it basically tells it. There's this whole event that he's going through in the Battle of the Somme and World War I, and he kind of has the rest of it's told kind of almost in like a flashback form,
right
yeah. From that,
and
it's showing kind of the more about this person's story, this man John Ronald Reuel Tolkien's story.
Ronald Reuel Tolkien.
Yeah, it's kind of a mouthful. John
It
Ronald
is.
Reuel.
It seems like he most often went by Ronald.
Well,
His mom called him John Ronald.
Yeah, I think
his friends sometimes called him John.
I think well, and they called him Tollers.
They did call him Tollers.
Yeah.
That's what they were saying. I thought they were saying Tollus, and I was like, what is Tollus?
Tollers.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's right. Pretty sure
he
that's
was
right.
taller than his buddies. Is that what that was about?
No, I think it's just like a playful form of Tolkien, right? Like Tollers.
Oh, Tollers. Got it.
How
I thought
you
you were saying Tollers.
You shorten your friends and family members' names to something.
It's like the
we do that
first
all the time
couple
with our
letters,
kids.
and and then add a new ending. Got it.
Yeah. I think that's right. It's been so. Let me say this. Here's the thing. So I went into this movie and I really tried not to read a lot of reviews. I mean, I kind of got a sense. I read a little bit, but didn't try to. I didn't want to spoil my own opinion or bias myself too much going into it.
Yeah.
I wanted to just be able to watch it as a movie. I mean, everybody listening that's gotten this far in this podcast knows how much this man means to me. And so I have a real propensity when it comes to stuff associated when people do stuff associated with him, I can get a little bit inwardly defensive.
Yeah.
And which is kind of stupid. It's pretty stupid actually because he's many people loved him before I did, and there's just millions of people adore him, and but as someone who spent a lot of time thinking about his works, and he played a really pivotal role in my own life in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so I really my knee-jerk response to things involving him and people trying to talk knowledgeably about him is to be very critical. Right?
Yeah. Because you care so much.
Exactly.
And you want to see him represented well.
You're like, hold on.
Yeah.
That's not the way it went. That's not what it was. But I really tried to go into this movie because I've seen enough biopics and enough historical events represented in films to know that it's rare that you do something that's just like perfectly historically accurate. Right?
Right. Yeah.
More often what happens is you get a person trying to tell a story in a film and about a particular aspect of a person's life, and you're going to condense it almost becomes a mythology itself, right? You pull historical factual events and turn them into kind of combine them, and things may get a little bit out of order in terms of how they really happened. You embellish interactions that we really know nothing about
because you're telling a story.
Because you're telling the
you
story.
You need to keep the audience engaged.
And so I really wanted to be able to just like turn off the critical function when it comes to like protecting all of the facts and all that kind of stuff, and just say, did I like this movie? Like, did this movie make me appreciate Tolkien more, and maybe teach me like, maybe embody some things that in a different and kind of shed light on some things for me in a positive way. I think it would be so that's really how I want to frame this conversation. I think it'd be interesting maybe when this movie comes out and we can watch it again. I'd really like to go back and so I've got my copy of Tolkien's biography, the authorized Tolkien biography by Humphrey Carpenter right here, which has been a long time since I've read it, several years. But I'd really like to go back and read the first few chapters before I watch this movie again, just to say like, okay, what's right and what's wrong, right?
Yeah.
Like, and not necessarily in a sense of saying like, did it, again, and not in the sense of being critical and ruining it for people who like it, or or anything like that, but just in saying like, how did these things actually come about, and are the portrayals true, that sort of thing. So I want to say, starting off, I don't think that the intent of this film was to be perfectly historically accurate, because if it was, it failed. But I don't think that's what they were aiming for, and I don't think that's what most biopics actually aim for. The question is, like, what was it actually aiming for? And maybe that's the good question to start off with, right? What was this movie? What did it seem to actually be aiming for? And because of the time period it's focused on, I kind of think it's trying to contextualize his own development into this writer, and kind of give us the background on how he became the writer that he did and wrote these books that so many people in the world adore, and mean so much to so many different people. So I think it was trying to just give us a good peek into that.
Yeah, I would agree.
And so, any other thoughts on that, like in terms of what you came away thinking the movie was trying to convey? And we can talk about whether it was how successful it was in that, and those sorts of things, later on. But any other things that you think?
Yeah, no, I would agree with everything you said. I think, obviously, most people in the world know Tolkien as the author of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and that's all they know. And he actually didn't write those until much later in his life.
Yeah.
And so I think the purpose of this movie was to just kind of give us an idea of the man of Tolkien, kind of his backstory, and give some insight into where these stories came from, what influenced them, and what they meant to Tolkien.
Yeah.
I think it was to, I would like to think that the purpose was to really give us an appreciation of Tolkien, of who he was, what was important to him, and why, and how these stories came about.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, like, no one would care about Tolkien except for his family, unless
unless he had written these books.
Unless he had written these books. Like, no one would know who he was.
Right.
And so that's really, you've got to think that's the real reason for this movie, right? Like, that's the thing. How did we get this man Tolkien? What were the early events in his life that gave us that gave us the superhero J.R.R. Tolkien?
Where did
right?
he come from? Yeah, it's like the Captain America. It's like the first Captain America movie, like his backstory. Where did Captain America come from?
The Spider-Man.
Or the Spider-Man
story that's been told.
Yeah, the origin story. It's an origin story. That's what it is.
Right. It's yeah, exactly. It was an origin story.
Yeah. And also, we've been saying his name wrong. It's Tolkien.
Tolkien. Yeah.
Tolkien.
So yeah, like that's how I think I want to frame my reaction to seeing this movie for the first time. I'm not a person who likes doing immediate reactions to things right after I watch them or read them or listen to them. I like to give
let it marinate.
I do. I like to give it marinate, give it time to
Mm-hmm.
marinate, and really like gather my thoughts and reflect on it.
I think raw reactions can be very good, though.
Well, they can, and so we're going to do that. We're going to react in a more raw fashion, so it may be a little jumbled and disordered. And again, maybe later on we'll do a rewatch of it and read the Carpenter biography, the relevant chapters in the Carpenter biography beforehand, and say
critical review.
How much did this? Now that we've had a chance to go back and review the facts, did this get anything wrong? Right? Like so wrong that so wrong that we need to like call it out, right? But anyway, we'll kind of go through the movie in the major chunks and talk about the different stuff. I will start off by saying that I think I think the movie was really, like, in terms of the cinematography, was very beautiful.
Absolutely.
I really I do. It's like I really do love the whole like kind of prep school, like kids kind of in their like teenage years, like growing up, and tragedy and joy and all these kinds of things. Like Dead Poet Society, like there's some elements of like Dead Poet Society in this movie for me.
Yeah.
I think I've said before, I think that's part of the reason that the Harry Potter stories are so beloved, is because they have that prep school element to them. If there was just like it's like you took a fantasy story but put it in a prep school, right? And I think there's something kind of cool about that. I really like the little motif that's repeated frequently of taking kind of alluding to how his experience in the Battle of the Somme like sort of inspired like the nastier aspects of Middle Earth, right?
Yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah.
It took me way too long to figure out that the companion that he was traveling with name was Sam.
Yeah, I figured that. I didn't realize that until like I think his last interaction.
Okay, good. So I wasn't the only one.
Did he ever call him Sam?
Maybe he didn't.
Until that point, yeah.
Maybe he didn't. Maybe that's why it took me a while.
Yeah, well, and that was a nice little scene because he does speak at one point, I think in his letters, about the influence of like the Tommy soldier, you know, so just your average like enlisted soldier.
Because Tolkien went in as an officer,
right?
Because he was in college,
and like his experience and his admiration for like the average Tommy, and how like that actually influenced his, the development of the character of Sam.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I thought that was kind of neat.
That was very neat.
A neat little shout out for Sam, Sam Gamgee, obviously.
Yeah.
And even at the end of the Battle of the Somme part where it has the big thing rising, the big demonic thing rising up.
Yeah.
You couldn't help but think of You couldn't help but think of Morgoth right there, right?
Yeah.
So, really liked
I enjoyed
that whole motif.
Yeah, I did too. I thought that was a really cool way to frame it.
Yeah.
Because I know just from reading letters and things like that Tolkien has written that. I mean, how can that kind of experience, that a wartime experience, especially one like World War I, how can that not have an influence?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
On how you live the rest of your life? It's just amazing to me that he survived. Like it's just like
the scenes. From what I understand, the scenes of World War I events were very, very true to what it was like in the trenches. It was like I've been reading. I've always been fascinated by World War II history. I think it's much more dynamic and a lot more fun to read about. World War I to me has just always been unintelligible, and I've been reading this. Book called A Very Short Introduction to World War I, just so I could wrap my mind more around like the major events and everything. But it's just like, then the Germans had their offensive, and they there were 300,000 casualties for the alliance or for the Entente, right? For Britain, there were 300,000 British and French casualties, but they had 200,000 casualties of their own. It's just mind-boggling the numbers of like just people, just young men just thrown against this wall of bullets and artillery and
gas
and just other horrible ways of dying. And, you remember this thing of there are many, I think, laments of Tolkien just being like, what a horrible like waste. We develop these technologies and we use them to just kill people en masse. It's not enough to kill a small army. We got to kill hundreds of thousands of people at a time. It's just crazy. It's
got to wipe out civilization.
Yeah. So just incredible evil and incredible folly that he tasted. In those events. What did you think about the early part of the film, especially like the scenes with his mother and then Father Morgan? Like how did you feel about those scenes?
I loved the scenes with his mom. Even though she's not in the movie very much because she passes away, I think, when he's still very young. How old was he? 12 or? I mean, he had just moved.
When she passes away.
Yeah.
It's unclear in the movie, but hold on, I got it right here.
I mean, maybe middle school age.
Yeah, I think he was. Where is it?
It's really not. It's really kind of.
No, keep talking.
But anyway, I was just gonna say that even though she's not in the movie very much, and you don't, she's only in like the very first couple. Maybe the first 10, 15 minutes of it. I feel like they did an excellent job of giving you a sense of the relationship between Tolkien and his mom. Like you could tell that that they were very close, that they loved each other very much, and that she, I think, had a huge influence on him, even from an early age.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it showed her just passionately telling stories and, you know, acting those stories out. And it seems like she had a real love for, you know, for imagination. And I think if she had lived, I think she would have encouraged him.
Yeah.
In his pursuit of writing.
So he was 12 when she died.
He was 12.
She
Okay.
died in 1904.
Okay. So yeah, he was still very young.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I really loved his mom.
Mabel.
Yeah, Mabel. She just seemed like she, you know, she was a pretty fantastic influence and a loving, you know,
Mm-hmm.
a loving presence in his life. And the priest, you know, I feel like it was a little, I mean, again, I don't know anything about this guy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what he was like in real life. But I felt like the way he was portrayed was a bit, what is the word? Just kind of how you would expect a priest of that age to be portrayed.
We're Catholic, everybody.
I know, we are Catholic.
So we're like,
but just like the
come on, why you got to be doing the priest like that? Oh yeah, you're going to show the priest who's authoritarian.
Caricature. Like he was just very caricaturized as what you would think of. As he was just kind of like a hard-nosed, like, you know, this is how you're going to do this and this is how you're going to behave. Not the, you know, not the loving father figure that I feel like maybe he was, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and this is one of those things I want to go back and read the authorized biography again. I mean, he was Tolkien's father figure, you know, for most of his teenage years. So there was going to be some. I mean, there was going to be some butting of heads between them.
But there just seemed to be any love. Like there just seemed to be no softness until the very end.
Until the very end, and I think, you know, but I think too it can be a little bit discounted. I think one thing I'm very uncertain about is the whole thing of, and I may be wrong, but I don't remember ever reading about him saying something to Father Morgan like, "You don't know what love is because you're a priest. You're just jealous.
You have no idea."
And it's like, you know, as someone who knows a lot of priests and a lot of very good priests, like those men know what love is. Like,
yeah, it's maybe a different kind of love, but they know.
Well,
different kind of love than Tolkien was probably talking about.
Well, he's talking about romantic. You know, he's talking about romantic love, but it's like, you know, but what? I mean, that just, you know, this isn't an episode about getting into like what is love? Baby, don't hurt me. But
even if he did say it, though, would he have admitted it? Probably not.
Well, but I guess my whole point is just that, like, you're right. It's just, it was a caricature, you know, and it was, and even the interaction there felt like a caricature of how, of course, this kid would react this way too. Now, to be fair, I'm sure young Tolkien wasn't particularly pleased when Father Morgan told him to break up with Edith.
I wonder if he really did.
Yeah,
he did.
Yeah, that's an actual event.
Okay.
Excuse me. It's a little hot in my studio right now.
I'm quite comfortable.
My throat's getting it's between you and me.
Yeah.
I'm taking it for the team, people, because I turned off the AC and the fan so that you guys would have pure crystalline sound. So
you know they're enjoying it.
Yeah. Well, patreon.com/TolkienRoad. That's all I'm saying. All right.
What did you think about what do you think about Mabel?
I actually would have liked a little more from her.
I would have too. I wish she had been in there more.
Yeah. You know, I thought she was very charming. Very
charming. Yeah.
And it's interesting. I got to go back and read again and see if like she was the one that introduced a lot of the stories to him. You know, like a lot of the stories that kind of got his early imagination going. What was the one she was reading in the movie? It was Sigurd. I'm not very good on all the ancient Norse tales.
I don't
and everything
remember.
like that. I think it was.
I know it had a dragon. I know a dragon was stabbed.
Right.
And there was gold.
Right, but
and there was a curse laid upon the gold.
The point of it was to show that like she was a very loving mother, and she was all that he and his brother had in the world at that point, and they were poor and fatherless, and then she dies, and it's really
you didn't even
really
get
sad.
did you get the impression that she was sick at all?
Apparently she had diabetes. Apparently, I don't think they say that in the movie, but I was just reading about it here. I've got the Wikipedia article pulled up for quick reference.
Because it seems like she's there and she's fine, and all of a sudden she dies, and you're like, oh.
Yeah.
She couldn't have been that old either.
Yeah, she was... So his mother died of acute diabetes at Fern College. She was 34 and as old as a person with diabetes mellitus type 1 could live without treatment. Insulin would not be discovered until 2 decades later.
Right. Yeah, before the discovery of insulin. Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
So... one of the most famous quotes that Tolkien ever wrote about his mother was there's the whole thing about, my own dear mother was a martyr indeed, and it is not everybody that God grants so easy a way to his great gifts as he did to Hilary and myself, giving us a mother who killed herself with labor and trouble to ensure us keeping the faith, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's an incredible tribute from the man to his mother, and I kind of feel like we got a little gypped by not having more of a portrayal of the thing that was obviously the most important thing to her. Now, again, I know there's people listening to this, and they're like, oh, here go the Catholic people again, talking about how important Catholicism was to J.R.R. Tolkien. Those are his own words. Like, those, that's what he said about his own mother, right? Mm-hmm. He called her a martyr, right? So I think we could have done just a little more to show like what that looked like why he called her that. I mean, I don't call people who have like died, like people that I love who have died, a martyr, like martyrs, right? I wouldn't do that unless I had a reason to,
like a good reason.
Really good reason to, right? Mm-hmm. So I feel a little gypped by the fact that there wasn't more about her and specifically about those things. I mean, they made it clear, obviously, that she was, that she was Catholic because she's giving her boys to this. Saying that the church is helping us out and referring to Father Morgan. And I can get that, they don't want to necessarily make a movie that's going to be all like partisan on religious lines or anything like that. But but it's, she's shown in the movie and then she's just kind of there. She reads some stories to her sons and then she dies. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like she was a little more important than that. And in Tolkien's life, right? For that, I mean, just by his own words. So
yeah, and then she's not really brought up again at all.
Yeah,
like true. At all.
Yeah,
I just realized that.
Yeah, that I'll chalk that up as a little bit of a disappointment on the hot take that you didn't have more.
Yeah,
more on that.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
All right. Moving on, so he goes from there, and the next big kind of segment of the film is his time at King Edward's School, which is the boarding school he goes to. He was at King Edward's School from, what are the years here? Let's see. He was there from 1903 to 1911. So this was kind of like his his teenage years that he was there. Mm-hmm. And I think the what's really interesting is it shows like the TCBS starting initially, but according to Wikipedia, the TCBS didn't start until 1911, which was the last year he was at King Edward's. So that's kind of an interesting little note. Again, you're not always dealing in like hard timelines when you do a movie like this, and that's understandable because you're trying to tell a particular story. Mm-hmm. And I don't feel nothing I know of makes me think that like they they butchered the story by doing it that way. But it's like when he shows up at King Edward's, he's got all these buddies.
Well, he first gets into a fight.
Well, but like the day he shows up, basically, it's only like a few days in terms of the movie
very beginning. Yeah, that's
before
true.
he like becomes best friends with all these guys.
Yeah,
right, and they form the
time.
TCBS.
Mm-hmm.
But really, it wasn't until like the very end of his time at King Edward's, and then it continued on into their college careers. Is what it sounds like. So. But a lot can happen in your senior year. So
yeah, so maybe they just spread it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there'll be a lot. I was actually flipping through the Tolkien biography in that section, and there was a lot in there about the TCBS. So it'd be fun to go back and read that. But just like little things, I won't mention any of them right now, but little things I was picking up on that I was like, oh yeah, it wasn't really like that. I mean, it's a movie. I feel like it's a movie very much of its time. It's speaking to a contemporary audience of our time. So it's making these characters more like kids of our time.
Right, because they want to be relatable.
Right.
Right, yeah.
But I think they were a lot...
relevant.
I think when we do another watch and review of this movie, after having read the book, we'll find that they're a lot different. They were a lot different in reality maybe not again to ruin it, but just keep that in mind.
Yeah. What I really but that was so central to really, I think, to a successful movie. I think having the TCBS form when it did and have it be such a large part of the movie, I think I really do think that that's what made the movie. I think take it out and don't add it in till his senior year. I mean, there really wouldn't have been much to say or do or talk about. And, this probably goes without saying, but a very central theme, if not the central theme of the movie, is clearly relationships. Mm-hmm. And that really was the core, like the TCBS was his, it carried him through.
Well, it was his fellowship. I mean, they were trying to show that to be the genesis of this fellowship, this like kind of little band of brothers.
But especially at this point where he has no mom, he has no dad.
Yeah.
This priest has care of him.
Yeah.
And he's off at this boarding school. I mean, he would have been lost without those guys for sure. And I think I was very touched by the way their relationships were portrayed.
Yeah.
I thought it made me want to be a teenage boy and like go to King Edward and be a part of the TCBS.
I'm glad you're not a teenage boy.
But I just was very touched by it. I thought it was really beautiful.
So, I did too. I mean, I overall, I enjoyed the relationships between all of them and the development of them and all those sorts of things. And
it was a good opportunity for some comic relief too.
Well, and it's definitely an important like aspect of his teenage years. Is his friendship with these other boys.
It's almost like a precursor to the Inklings.
In a way, yeah. I mean, I think it's almost it's kind of a genesis of that maybe.
The brotherhood.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then of course he meets Edith during this time as well, and they're living. I'd forgotten that they lived in the same, basically with the same widow, right, or the same woman, and so that was really interesting. And I was just reading this again. I'm on Wikipedia, and I was just reading this note and it's from the biography apparently. Edith and Ronald took to frequenting Birmingham tea shops, especially one which had a balcony overlooking the pavement. There they would sit and throw sugar lumps into the hats of passers-by, moving to the next table when the sugar bowl was empty. So apparently that little scene of the throwing of the sugar lumps was for
legit.
real. So that was
That's
that was a
cool.
funny little scene.
That was very funny.
Let's see. So and actually it's they don't say this in the movie, but Edith was 3 years his senior. So 3 years older than him, right? So so that's also interesting, because actually she seems a little younger than him actually in the movie.
In the movie, yeah.
But I don't know, maybe the same age. I mean, not like terribly younger than him.
Well, I think maybe just part of it is she's such a free spirit and very vivacious, and Tolkien, tends to be more serious and intellectual. So
he's a little bit of a stuck-up sticky beat.
So maybe that's why she just seemed younger than him, because, she just was, maybe a little bit more alive, shall we say?
Yeah. I
lively. That's the word I was looking for.
One thing that really, like, again, I wasn't sitting there being like, they got this wrong, taking notes like during the movie. I was just trying to enjoy the movie.
I made him leave his gong at the door, people.
My gong?
Your gong. Yeah.
You think I was going to like bang a gong every time there was an error?
There was an error.
Pause the movie. I have a clarification to make in the middle of the theater.
Remember the Gong Show? And like the floor would open and people would fall through it?
I remember a thing called the Gong Show, but I never watched it.
Okay. Well, that's what it was. The gong was the thing that told people that they were wrong and they needed to go away. Yeah. Well, it was either that or the buzzer. So anyway. Yeah. But
so
even though that wasn't your intent, what did you come up with?
Well, what does he say to her when he's leaving for the war? He says you deserve all the you deserve all the happiness, or something like that, like happiness. And then he's like, no, you deserve something else. And he's like, you deserve magic. And I was like, Tolkien would not have said that.
Oh, because he doesn't like magic.
He does not like magic. Come on, people. Like that to me was like worthy of calling out, right? Like, because all you got to do is read the introduction to the Silmarillion, and you'd understand this, that he did not like magic, right?
Maybe he meant it in a different way.
Oh, stop defending it.
I thought it was very romantic and sweet.
If anything, he should have said, you deserve enchantment, or you deserve escape, right? Or you deserve, just something that's like more of a, for a person who is so specific about words.
You deserve every catastrophic moment.
You deserve catastrophe,
in the
baby.
Universe.
What's catastrophe? Oh, you don't know it. Yes, I haven't written that essay yet. No, but like for someone, like one of the themes of this movie was language and the importance of language to him and the role it played, and I really liked that aspect.
Yeah.
And then what do? They use a bad
put
word.
Words in his mouth.
They use a bad Tolkien word, a Tolkien bad word, right? You don't. Magic is not a good thing. Magic is not something you wish on the woman that you think is the most wonderful creature in all of creation, right? Like you find something else. Magic is not that thing,
all
right? Because what's magic? Magic is the machine. Magic is the thing that's about to kill all of your friends, right? That's what it is. That's what it is in his own word.
According to Tolkien, yeah.
So I am going to insist. I'm going to be a jerk about that point. That was bad. That was a major. Again, it didn't ruin the movie for me, but like that was a big red X. Like, in one particular scene where I was just like, no, he wouldn't have said that.
The guy's getting ready to go off to war. His mind is probably a jumble.
Okay, well, you're going to pull that hole. And I'm just saying, like, if you're going to tell this story that's kind of like...
I totally get it.
That's kind of like a mythologized representation of his life, right? That's an important one to get right. So, anyway, I'm done.
Well, Okay, if you're done, then I won't.
You can
I was just going to say that he hadn't written the Silmarillion at this point, so maybe he still was figuring out how he truly felt about magic.
No, I get that, but I'm saying, like...
But what we know now, he wouldn't have
again,
said that
this is a mythologized version of his life, right? Mm-hmm. Trying to say, like, where did he come from?
Got it.
I'm just saying, like, that's a word that he explicitly calls out for a movie that's about language, right? Mm-hmm. And this man and his own unique view of the world, right? Mm-hmm. They used a word that, one of the few words that he's actually called out and said, that's a bad word.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
And specifically in my own universe. So I really had to take issue with that.
Can we talk about Edith for a hot moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about Edith.
Let's talk about Edith. I just slipped through the biography that you had out here.
Yeah.
And based on pictures of Edith in that book, I think she was cast very well.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I the moment I saw who they cast for this film, for Edith in this film, I was like, yeah, they got her right. I wasn't so sure about Nicholas Hoult as a young Tolkien. I mean, let me see if I can find the pictures in here. But
they're further toward the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was cast super well, and I just adored her. I could see, like, she seemed to be the perfect yin to Tolkien's yang. Like, I think...
yin.
Did I say it wrong?
Yin to yang.
Yin to yang, whatever. She completed him. She was, like... She just really, I think she did a good job of kind of pulling Tolkien out of his own mind, and kind of forcing him to look around and see the world through maybe a different lens. Because she was super, she just was a free spirit and just very charismatic and very, just full of life. And she too was an orphan, which I didn't realize.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. They had that in common, but I loved how their relationship was portrayed, and I loved, I loved her.
Yeah.
I can totally see why that she and Tolkien would have been. I can see why she became his Luthien.
Yes. Yeah. Totally. Yeah, I really liked her, and the definitely the actresses who portrayed her, I think, did a good job, and definitely were cast very well. They look a lot like her in the pictures that we have of her during that time period. And
she's very, I think what was good too for Tolkien, at least the way she's portrayed in the movie, is she's very very confident and very stubborn, but in a good way. You know, like she was. Not everybody can go toe to toe with Tolkien.
Yeah.
On certain matters, but she could, and she did. You know, she held her own.
Let me say this. This is a thought that's kind of, again, this is a little bit of a hot take, but like, I feel like it is really interesting that they were both orphans, and I would have liked to see a little bit more like just going really deep in their early relationship, you know, and like the significance of them both being, and I mean, there was a little bit of that, but I feel like there was a lot of like, I just feel like there were some moments that could have, like, there were definitely some moments that could have gone a little deeper, especially between the two of them, like in terms of, you know, they share some moments, but there's like, for a guy who was all about like language and expression, there wasn't a lot of like, just talking about like just, I guess, I don't know, just going deep into things that really connected them, you know?
I thought the scene in the tea shop, in fact, this was funny. This is just a little quick aside, but there's this scene where he takes her to this fancy schmancy tea shop. And they walk in.
That's where they throw the sugar lumps.
Sugar lumps. But they walk in, and you kind of pan across the room, and my first thought was, Edith's not wearing a hat.
Oh, yeah.
Because all the other women in there are wearing hats. And I'm like, Edith forgot her hat. And then they sit down at the table, and what is the first thing Edith says? I don't have a hat.
Right.
I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so sorry, but I noticed first. Anyway, but what I was going to say was I thought that scene, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I really loved that scene, and I thought it did a really good job of giving a bit of, I mean, I would have liked more of that kind of thing, but I feel like that particular scene, you know, with their conversation, and she asks him to tell him a story, or she asks him to tell her a story, and he gives her a hard time, and she gives him a hard time back, and then he starts talking about this language he made up, and she like starts like breaking it down and saying why it's not, like, what's wrong with it, and he's like, what, you're like, did you just really like insult this language? You know, are you trying to just destroy this language I just wrote? And she's like, well, it's not good, and this is why. And you know, and then she's the one, it's in that scene where she says, you know, words are beautiful not because of the way they sound, because that's what Tolkien was. He was like all about how words are pronounced and how they sound. And she said words aren't beautiful because it's not the sound of words that make them beautiful, but it's the meaning behind them. It's what you associate them with. You know, and she uses the example of the word hand. So anyway, I thought that particular scene did a really good job of giving us some insight into, you know, going a little bit deeper into their relationship, that aspect of their relationship.
Yeah, that was a good scene. Two thoughts. So I was a little bit, as I was watching that scene, I was thinking, I don't think that's what Tolkien really meant about like that there's certain words that are just like have like an inherent beauty to them. Like, I think because Tolkien believed in meaning, like he believed in in ultimate meaning for things, right? I think Tolkien's whole thing was like words that there's almost like, because he was a philologist, I think he believed that like there was an ultimate like almost like language is this gift from God, right? Like, and that certain words have this mysterious, just qualitative beauty about them because there is some maybe deeper meaning to them, right? That we don't quite understand. So it's a mysterious notion of his, and it would be a hard thing to capture in film. It didn't take away from that scene for me too much, but like it was just something I was saying. I was like, I don't quite feel like that's.
I think they took that too far. Maybe that was kind of a running joke throughout the movie, though, right?
It was.
That was his obsession with how words are pronounced.
Yeah, but Tolkien like had I mean his Tolkien's love for language was almost a supernatural love, you know, and it's an interesting little thesis too, because you know the whole thing of in the Gospel of John where Christ is said to be the Word, right? The Word of God, like the Word of God, right? And so that's an interesting little concept that kind of ties into his to his Catholic his Catholic faith. But the other thing was with his and Edith's relationship, I think it would have been nice to have more of a conversation when they're forced to part ways, right? And when Father Morgan lays down the law and Tolkien realizes he's got to break up with her, and he's not going to really see her again for a long time. I think there could have been more. It just felt very typical, like how you might think that would go. But these are like, if this is a movie, like a worthwhile movie about these people, then it seems like there could be more to be like. I would have wanted to be surprised in the way that maybe Edith reacted to it, right?
Yeah.
Not that she would have been happy about it, but like that it wouldn't have just been this typical like, I'm gonna stomp my foot and walk out of the room and never talk to you again. You know.
She could have reacted that way.
I mean, maybe she did, but she could have reacted any number of ways. There's lots of scenes that are just kind of speculated upon in the movie. So I just felt like that's like...
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
I think something else could have been done to make it a little more, not sort of a cliche, but...
Like a little bit more meaningful.
But a little bit more like, oh, that was really maybe insightful, right? Using things that we know about her from later in life, right? Using the whole thing of that she's the inspiration for Luthien, right? Like, wouldn't it have been awesome? I'm just spitballing here, but like, wouldn't it have been awesome if instead, like, because think of Tolkien as like Baron, the wounded warrior here, right? And instead of like, she says like, she like walks out like this, girl that he's just broken up with. She's like, it'll be okay, right? Like, it'll like, not that she like pledges she'll always be there waiting for him, but like she says like she's truly that light to him, right? And like I think that could have been a really powerful way to handle that scene. That she would be there. Maybe I'll go back and read the Carpenter biography and it turns out like there are actual records if that's the way she responded to it, but anyway, just again, I think it felt a little too typical for me.
Got it.
Yeah. Anyway,
duly noted.
Oxford, the Oxford years. Any thoughts on that? In addition, we've already covered a lot of ground.
Let me back up just real quick. The whole reason that Father Morgan, is that his name?
Yeah.
The Father Morgan kind of forces him to break up with Edith. Is he says you have a, what do you say? You have some kind of, he had a job to do, or he had something. Oh, it was
the exams for Oxford.
Getting into Oxford. But I don't understand why he said something like, "And by God, you'll see it through," or something like that. That there was something that he apparently that there was a reason he just had to go to Oxford and had to do this. I mean, was it because it's what his mom had wanted him to do, or is it because
I don't know, but I mean, it's it was Oxford, right? Like,
I know it was
like
Oxford, but it seems like why can't?
Well, he also had to get a scholarship to Oxford because he couldn't afford to go there.
Yeah.
So you're trying to like, this is a kid who had no money.
I understand.
Right? So he needs to go to
he needs to be
school.
Focused. Is that what you're saying? Well, he doesn't need any distractions.
He needs to get into Oxford so that he can have a good life, right? And like instead of
support his brother,
instead of being a baker, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I guess I was confused about.
You got to kind of be like, props to Father Morgan for setting Tolkien straight in some of these things, because otherwise he might have just wound up being a baker and we might not have the Hobbit or the Lord of the Rings.
That's true. But I guess I was just curious about why once he got into Oxford, why they couldn't have continued their relationship. So he must have just felt like she was going to be too much of a distraction. Yeah,
and I think, I mean, I'm sure she was. I'm sure she was a distraction for him, right? And I know in our day and age, there's nothing better than romantic love. I'm rolling my eyes when I say that. And there's no higher cause.
Insulted.
There's no higher cause. I love you, baby.
I know.
I know that for our culture, there's just no higher cause, right, than romance and, finding. I'm gonna start making people mad.
You need to stop before you put your foot.
But like, but let's be honest here. Like, this was 1911, right? In England, you didn't just run off with your girlfriend and start a good life.
That's
and go,
not
and,
what I was
and
advocating.
go find a good. No, I'm not saying you were.
Okay.
And go find like a good job down the street, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you were, if you had done that, you were probably going to be shunned by your family, and you were going to be in a really hard position to even make that marriage work in a lasting fashion anyway.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm just coming at this from the female perspective, and just knowing, again, as an orphan, Edith having so little, she even makes that point at one point in the movie where after Tolkien makes her leave the hangout with the TCBS guys earlier than she wanted to, she's like, I'm a companion. Like, I have no friends. I don't get out. Like, the only, I play the piano for an old lady and I carry her purse. That's my life. And here I was with some cool guys, and you made me, leave. I was able to have meaningful intellectual conversations, and you just yanked me away, know? So I guess my heart just broke for Edith there, and I was mad at Father Morgan. I understand why he did it, but I was like, why couldn't they have still been in touch? And and if he's, long distance relationships were proof that they work. I mean, anyway. That just made me sad for Edith. So,
I'll
get off my
I'm
soapbox.
sorry. I'm like, what?
No, I didn't understand why. I understand he needed to get into Oxford, but I didn't understand why it had to be Oxford or Edith. That's what I didn't understand. But it's really kind of a moot point. Because I think he could have done guys do fine having girlfriends in college.
But you're not like...
Not in 1911.
Not in, I'm just saying, I don't know. Like, he could have done perfectly fine. I don't know, but I'm just trying to play the opposing viewpoint here. I think that's a very 2019 view of situations like this,
probably,
right?
Yeah.
And even in 2019, romantic interest for kids who are trying to accomplish some task for their lifelong career can be a distraction.
Yeah.
Right? Why do you think so many people don't get married until they're in their 30s nowadays, right?
No, that's true.
And, because it's like, well, I got to get my career going first, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
but they clearly had a very, very special relationship, and, the proof's in the pudding, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he got through Oxford, he got through the war, and they ended up getting married.
Yeah.
Despite the priest's best effort to break them up.
I was reading this little note, and again, he wasn't he basically said you can do whatever you want after you're this
21,
age, right?
Yeah.
But
I'm your guardian for now.
Right.
Yeah.
And
it was the unpopular, but probably
and she
smart decision.
She eventually do get married, and she converts to Catholicism. And I honestly as a father, and I know nobody likes it when the guy comes, the father figure comes in and is all paternalistic, but it's sometimes a father, whether he be a spiritual father or a biological father, might have a kind of a good perspective. Yeah. Might realize that you're going to mess things up. Mm-hmm. You maybe need me to be a little hard-handed on you. He wasn't horrible to him.
No, he wasn't.
But he was firm with him, and he's like, you need to get your shiz together. Mm-hmm. You need to go to Oxford and do well there, and then guess what? Beyond that, you can marry Edith, right? And he didn't come out and say you could and should marry Edith or anything like that. But it's but there sometimes it turns out that it all worked out in the end, didn't it?
It did,
right?
I chuckled a little bit when that kind of initial exchange, when they're having the hard conversation, and Reese is like, and she's not even Catholic. Right. That was the absolute worst thing about her.
There's a bunch of people in the movie theater that laughed at that part.
Yes, I kind of chuckled too.
But
then at the end, after Tolkien's recovering in the hospital, Father Morgan's there, and he said Edith did not leave your side once the whole time. Apparently, he had trench fever.
Yeah.
And he was in a coma or asleep for a long time. And Father Morgan says Edith did not leave your bedside once, not once. And he said, you were right to pursue her. That's what he said.
Yeah.
I thought that was cool.
So, important note, Edith and Tolkien were actually married before he went off to war.
Oh, like in a civil ceremony or something?
No, not in a, I mean, he was Catholic. He wasn't going to get married in a civil ceremony. No, they were married. Come on.
No, I just meant like a simple, I meant like a simple ceremony.
That's a little different from a civil ceremony.
Simple. No, I was just surprised. That's all.
No, it says right here, Edith Bratt and Ronald Tolkien were formally engaged at Birmingham in January 1913 and married at St. Mary Immaculate Roman Catholic Church, Warwick, on 22 March 1916. So they were engaged for 3 years.
Yeah, they were.
In his 1941 letter to Michael, Tolkien expressed admiration for his wife's willingness to marry a man with no job, little money, and no prospects except the likelihood of being killed in the Great War.
Exactly. I was going to say, and also heading off to war.
Right. So, that is pretty awesome. I mean, that says a lot of good stuff about her, you know?
It really,
and about their love.
Exactly.
You know?
About her love for Tolkien. Yeah. And
it's interesting, some of the choices, like the narrative choices they made with this story, because there are other ways they could have gone, which to me would have been even more like dramatic and beautiful, you know, like to show that they actually married before he went off to war.
That would have been cool.
That would have been pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Like in just like, you know, just think about like a scene where they are like exchanging vows and then like parting ways so that he can go off and probably die in a war, you know, like how dramatic would that have been, you know?
Instead, it has them reuniting.
Right.
At, like, right before he gets on the boat.
Mm-hmm.
And she's engaged to someone else at the time.
Yeah, she is. And that's true. She actually was. I was reading this here. On the evening of his 21st birthday, Tolkien wrote to Edith, who was living with family friend C.H. Jessup. He declared that he had never ceased to love her and asked her to marry him. And this would have been 1913. This would have been 1913. Edith replied that she had already accepted the proposal of George Field, the brother of one of her closest school friends. But Edith said she had agreed to marry Field only because she felt on the shelf and had begun to doubt that Tolkien still cared for her. She explained that because of Tolkien's letter, everything had changed. Let's see. Yeah, so like that was, so apparently he wrote and proposed to her and she was already engaged to somebody else. On January 2nd of 1913, and then 6 days later they were engaged, right? So,
well, didn't take her long to break off that initial engagement.
No, it didn't. Well, you know, and I think it's probably true. She was, you know, she needed to marry well, right? Because otherwise she was going to have a really rotten life,
right? Yeah.
And as an orphan, so yeah, you know, you can understand maybe why she didn't know, and she, you know, maybe contact was lost between them and everything like that. But yeah,
that is really cool. They got married.
It's a very interesting. It's a very interesting courtship and relationship, you know, to think about with them, because there's a lot of different aspects to it, and maybe some of the stuff maybe the way they portrayed it in the film seems a little questionable to me in certain aspects.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Because it is such a beautiful love story. Hey, people, I wrote a book that's kind of like inspired by it. So, you know, Tolkien's Requiem, anybody? I know it's about Beren and Luthien, but Beren and Luthien are about Tolkien and Edith. So. And
I do think, even though they, you know, apparently got some of the, you know, they changed some of the details, I definitely got, you know, going into the movie, knowing how special they were to each other, you know, knowing that Beren and Luthien were written on their tombstones. I feel like the movie did a very good job of capturing what they had together. Like it definitely seemed like a very it was not your typical boyfriend, girlfriend, young love kind of thing.
Yeah.
There was definitely like a maturity and a deep respect and appreciation and love there. So I thought, you know, in general, that was very well done.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, let's see here. What else? Well, before we kind of give our overall rating for the film, do you have any other scenes that you wanted to, or issues that you wanted to bring up? Like I said, I think it'd be fun to, when the movie comes out again, to maybe do a rewatch of it, read the, you know, the parts of Carpenter's biography that pertain to it, and then watch it and maybe with a little more critical eye. But yeah, any other big things you wanted to call out?
Well, I thought it was interesting. You know, we talked a little bit at the beginning about how the war, is kind of the motif through which the story is framed and told. And at the beginning, we learn, one of the first scenes in the war is he's looking for a friend.
Yeah.
He's looking for Jeffrey Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And clearly, who he must have been a super special friend to Tolkien.
Yeah.
To be willing to risk his life for that, to find his friend.
I don't know that there's any truth to that whole thing about like going,
There goes my balloon. Okay.
I think that's, again, maybe I'll go back and read and find out otherwise, but, I don't think a man with trench fever is like wandering around on the battlefields, is
looking for
artillery is, going off and men are dying looking for his friend. Like, that to me was like, it was a cool scene, but I think that was among the most like non-historically accurate.
Okay.
Like,
well, I guess what I wanted to say about that was clearly between Edith and the TCBS, Tolkien was blessed with some incredibly strong, meaningful friendships.
Yeah.
Throughout his life. And, even meeting Professor Wright at Oxford, that was a really kind of humorous thing. And, it clearly shows, even though the movie didn't talk much at all about his Catholic faith or his belief in God or anything like that, I think it clearly shows that even though he was orphaned from a young age, like, he was watched over.
Mm-hmm.
In a very good way.
And I do love the sense of destiny of, like that they formed this bond and they wanted to change the world through their art. And, he was the one that really ended up carrying the torch for the four of them. And I think that's a really beautiful and touching.
And they all recognize that in him.
And I think that embodies a lot of that generation, like that how many men went, these young men went to the trenches and died these horrible deaths and were just snuffed out in all their talents. And, the men who survived kind of felt, how much of them felt like they were carrying the torch for their friends and brothers and comrades.
Accomplishing what they couldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Overall, I did want to mention, I liked the little thing when they were talking about when they were in the tea shop, Edith and Tolkien were in the tea shop and they showed the two trees. And they weren't the two trees of Valinor because they were like poisonous trees. But they still, there was still a little like illusion there. It seemed like to,
because one was white and
the
one
trees
was
of Valinor.
dark. Yeah.
I think there were some other things I really, that it brought to mind, but like I said, I didn't take notes. I just been rattling it off as it comes to me. So, next time we watch it, we'll have to maybe take a little bit more notes, and I'm sure other stuff will come to mind. Well, Greta, what? So, are you ready to give a kind of a rating on the scale of A to F, or any other things you want to mention before you do that?
I will say, I think the one other thing I would have probably liked to have seen a little bit more of is his love of nature was is so prevalent in his writing. And there were little bits and pieces here and
like
there.
At the beginning?
Yeah.
When they move away from the countryside to Birmingham, and that's a very like Shire to Mordor sort of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. That was a very like the Birmingham, showing Birmingham was like, they're obviously trying to show like even like the tower, like one of the towers in Mordor.
I know, right? I was like, oh my goodness, this is
and I think that's true. Like, I think he kind of drew inspiration for Mordor from lots of aspects of like
Birmingham.
Industrialism and that kind of thing.
Yeah, because you went from the clean, pure air and lots of green space. I guess I wish would have liked to have seen more incorporation of, at the end where he's with Edith and their kids, and he's telling his kids to say hi to the trees or talk to the trees or whatever. I thought that was sweet, but I guess I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of just his appreciation for nature brought in somehow.
Yeah, but I can see that. Yeah, I mean, there was good natural like scenery in it and everything like that. But yeah, I think they could have done a little more. I feel like that's my overall complaint coming away from it right now is just a little bit more of. I feel like there could have been a little bit more of a poetic flair to the writing. not just like the cinematography, but like, but like, you know, even at the end of the movie when he sits down and he writes, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit," right? And that's like the final thing. I feel like it was just kind of like inserted in there at the very end, you know? And it's like, I knew that was going to be the ending. I hadn't read anything, but I was just like, that's going to be the last scene he's going to write. "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit." And sure enough, it was. And, all right, so smart. I know everybody's like, "Wow, John, you're a genius." And you're full of yourself too, so shut up. But anyway, but I just kind of had the sense that was going to be it. And, but I don't know, like, I feel like there could have been like that's maybe what I was trying to say about the whole thing with Edith and Tolkien and their breakup, right? That there could have been deeper, there could have been like better writing there, just more of like a sense of like irony and like kind of deep irony and surprise in different scenes. Like I feel like that distinguishes a lot of my favorite movies from movies that aren't my favorite movies, but I still like. Yeah. You know, it's just really good writing that kind of surprises you and has kind of a poetic flourish to it, you know?
The unexpected twist.
But even when it's maybe expected, you're like...
But then it's done in an unexpected way.
It's really done gracefully, right. You know? Like the writing makes it result in a, you know, kind of brings you to that result in a graceful manner instead of just being like... And then he sat down and started writing The Hobbit, you know? Yeah.
Well, there was a little bit more before that.
And then even like in the end when in Edith comes out and like is kind of chiding him for, you know, not spending
enough time with the family.
I was like that's kind of a bad note for Edith to end on. Like, you know, after this beautiful thing of their, like, it's almost like you're introducing a new problem into the story.
No, I thought that was very real though, because I think it's easy to glamorize. You know, oh, it must have just been all roses and chocolates.
I agree that it's real. Okay. I don't agree that it's good writing.
Okay.
For the sake of the story that you're telling.
I see what you're saying.
Because you're introducing a new problem at the very end.
That is true.
Right?
At the end, yeah.
So unless you've got a sequel coming that's about
all the problems and Tolkien's demons.
You know, Tolkien the midlife crisis or something like that, right? Like, you know, that's the next movie that's coming in this. It'll be a trilogy, right?
It's gotta be.
Maybe that was just a teaser for that. So, but you see what I'm saying?
I do see what
introduces
you're saying.
a problem. I was just kind of like, why are you, like, we love Edith, and now all of a sudden, like, she seems kind of like she's nagging him. Yeah. Yeah. You know, I'm not saying, like, again.
No, again, I get what you're saying. I do. Right. I totally get, like, for the sake of writing, it wasn't great, but I also think it just showed like her feistiness. You know, and I think it was like, you know, it really, and for all we know, that's why he was able to because what she says is you need to figure out the purpose, right? What is going to be the purpose of all this, or you need to just abandon it. And I think that was probably good advice. Anyway, we can agree to disagree on that. But she clearly helped him kind of figure out where am I going with this?
It's bad writing. Okay. Again, like we're not disagreeing on the same point.
Okay.
Okay. It's real. And if it was the start of another movie, that would be great.
Or maybe just if the movie explored it more.
Oh, yeah, sure. If it was like if it had been a little bit of an extension onto it, and if it gracefully led into him being like, I'm going to write this story. Right? Mm-hmm. Okay. But again, it just didn't feel like that to me. It was just this weird... I was just like, why...
Yeah, like, I can see what you're saying
I liked Edith so much, and now I'm kind of like, why are we showing her this way? Anyway, I feel like she didn't get the right resolution for her own character, like, because you threw that in there.
Well, that wasn't the last we see of Edith either.
Yeah, but she doesn't really do anything in the next... She's just kind of walking with her family on, like, a nice family walk.
Well, I guess that's true. The
next scene.
Yeah.
Anyway, there I am with my opinions.
Yeah,
right.
You are. Enough of that.
All right.
That. Stop it.
Okay. So, final grade, A to F.
A to F. Me? I'm going first.
Or I can go first, whichever one you want.
You go ahead. I'm still mulling over.
I would give it a B.
Okay.
A B.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say B+.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. I don't think it was like I'm not rushing out and telling everybody I know they need to see it. And it's one I'd watch again. It's just kind of an enjoyable biopic.
It is. I will say my one other criticism, though, is I feel like it dragged in some places, and it had kind of this heavy-ish feel to it. Mm-hmm. And not that you wanted to make it a comedy. I understand it wasn't supposed to be a comedy. Yeah. But it's a more intense, with the backdrop being World War I guess that should be expected.
Right.
So, yeah, but I enjoyed it more than I thought I would.
Cool.
I didn't really have super high expectations. Because I usually find that when I like the trailer, I end up not liking the movie. Mm. And I liked the trailer for this one, but I actually enjoyed the movie as well.
There you go.
Yeah. I thought the acting was also very, very good.
Yeah. I thought the actor that portrayed Tolkien Nicholas Hoult did a good job.
Yeah, I would agree.
So overall, worthy film. Definitely check it out if you haven't seen it yet. And we'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on the movie too. Future correspondence, send us a note. We'll read your own thoughts on air, and just interested to hear what everybody else thinks.
Yeah, so. Same here. So please share.
Please do. All right. Thanks again to our patrons. You all rock. Al Taylor, Andrew Herbert, Andrew Thomas, Azia Veneer, Bethany Engler, Brian Orr, Kat Lane, Chris Loftus, Chuck Farnung, Daniel Delaney, David Bigwood, David Dickinson, Emilio Perea, Eric Bissett, Hunter Johns, Ish of the Hammer, James Applegate, James Lindberg, Joe Towns, John Rice, Josh Sosa, Lawrence McGowan, Margaret Lyon, Matt Scarrance, Robert Franks, Sarah Murphy, Shannon Stockbridge, Travis Lawheed, Ty Miller, Dr. William Hutton, and Zeke Farmer. Thank you all again.
Yes, thank you guys.
And I think that's all we got.
I think that's a wrap.
I think that is a wrap.
Yeah, that was a good discussion.
Indeed.
I enjoyed that.
All right.
There's another Tolkien biopic coming out.
No, it got canceled. It was about Tolkien and Lewis, actually, which might have been an even better one. But I don't know. Maybe they'll make a sequel about Tolkien and Lewis to this one. Who knows?
I was really hoping Lewis was going to make a cameo in this one, but...
he doesn't show up until a little later. So
that's what I've figured that out, yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.
All right,
we'll
guys,
talk at you next time.
y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.